I want to know how much of this life before I came into the physical was planned.
General basics. The details are attracted by the vibrational countenance that you have. And so here's the best way of explaining it. Certainly, you do have intention coming in. And to the degree that you get into alignment and stay in alignment, then that non-physical intention is satisfied. But it is usually rather general. In other words, you know you're a creator of your own experience, and you expect to appreciate the contrast. And you know that your guidance system will guide you. And you feel enormous appreciation for the others with whom you will co-create. The details are really left for you to discover for your surprise and delight. And it's the reason that once you get here, there is so much that is already going on around you that you get to observe and then choose from. Sometimes people say, I'm sure I didn't have much choice, or I would not have been born to these people. And I would not have been born in this town. I would have been born in Malibu, near the beach. But your intentions are satisfied by your time and place of birth.
Okay, so I have a hard time answering, because I beat stage 4 cancer. I have a hard time answering some of my friends, hey, thank you, that have gone through that. So I created it. I created that cancer in me, or it's a hard question to answer. Or babies that are born with, I set out to do that, to beat it, maybe to sit here and say, yeah, I beat.
It's one of the reasons that we said to you earlier that we're going to tell you something harsh, and that is that you never get it done. And so the thing that is really worth considering, which will really give you the most satisfaction in the answering of this question, is since you accept, most of you to some degree, that you are the creator of your own reality. But even as we are fine-tuning here today, you realize that most people are responding to the reality that is around them, and therefore are offering a vibration that pretty much matches what they're responding to, and therefore are creating a reality that's sort of based upon what they are responding to. And so when we begin making the distinction that you get what you think about, and we make the distinction between the thoughts that you are thinking and the thoughts that you are receiving, then you realize that there's a whole lot of creating by default going on. So we never say to you, you created that exact thing because you exactly wanted that thing, because there's a lot of creating going on by default. But there is also benefit from everything that you're creating, because from every place that you stand, you are launching rockets, and there is never a situation that you cannot overcome if the desire is strong and you're able to bring your thoughts into vibrational alignment with what you are desiring. The subject that makes what you were just projecting here feel so uncomfortable to so many, that idea that things happen to me that I'm not in control of, or even if I was in control of them, I didn't know that I was, and so that I didn't, and so I had experiences that I didn't want, which will ultimately lead perhaps to the death experience. The thing that is at the basis of so much discomfort is the misunderstanding of how eternal we all are, and of how that there is no death. Most people have come to the place that they are thinking of the death experience as something that is so bad that you even use it as punishment. If you knew how not bad it was, you wouldn't use it to punish people. You'd keep them alive as long as you could. You'd teach them things that are in abject disharmony with their desires, and you would convince them that they cannot be or do or have whatever they want. You would teach them pretty much like most of you teach each other anyway, you see. And so sometimes people want to go back to the beginning of thought, or to the beginning of that which they are, and we say, just pay attention to the thoughts that you think and how they feel, and realize that when you got on those hopeful thoughts, how good they felt, and when you were not on those hopeful thoughts, how bad they felt. And don't try too hard to figure out what anybody else is doing. Just let your own experience and your own awareness of the kinds of thoughts that you were having and the way those thoughts turned to things and what the results of that were. Let that be your understanding, because words really don't teach. Sometimes you have such powerful desire to understand something. And so you deliberately, from the non-physical perspective, and sort of not so deliberately from the physical standpoint, attract a situation that gives you clarity about that. We know for sure that you feel more empowered now than you ever did before. The audience response was to your empowerment. Yes.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Why does anybody come into a physical experience? In other words, what's the point of it? What's the point of it? If it's not to prove worthiness, then what's the point? If it's not to get to some ending place, what's the point? It is for the joy of the experience along the way. And so the thing that this particular subject really makes us want to emphasize is that so many people are approaching life wanting to get to the end place, wanting to get to the cure. You said, I beat it. I beat this thing I did not want, and I got to this place that I did want. But what we want to point out is that it is the satisfaction that is happening along the way that is responsible for that. Somewhere along in that process, you were able to find a stronger desire than a belief that was opposing it. You don't beat anything, because there is not a pushing anything away, but there is an enhancement of something. If your desire is strong enough, this is a statement that we really want you to hear. If your desire is strong enough, it does not matter what your beliefs are. Your strong desire with your inner being in vibrational alignment with it can bring about for you whatever it is that you choose. But depending upon the beliefs that you hold that are in opposition, it gives you a rougher ride along the way. We said to you earlier that these words don't mean very much until you've had an opportunity to do some meditating, to do some really strong clarifying of your vibration, and then see the results of it. Then these words will be more meaningful to you after you've had some of that experience than before. And the same is true with you. The words that you are hearing now are more meaningful after the experience of that than they were even before. And so you have to know that, you don't have to acknowledge it, but we know that you want to, that your desire for life became stronger than it had ever been within you once you felt that something was challenging it. And so you focused upon your desire in stronger ways. And because the mix of vibration going into that within you was such, then you were able to find more alignment toward your desire and less alignment toward fearful beliefs. And so it's always that way. We want everyone to understand that there's no reason to fear anything, that every experience is a clarifying process whereby you get to define and decide what it is you want. And once you've come to a conclusion about what you want, and something like that really caused you to focus, most of you, we love you so much, you know what's coming next, don't focus until you feel like you really need to. Most of you are rather sloppy in your thinking until you feel like you really need to. And sometimes your habit of being sloppy in your thinking is such that you're never able to really get focused upon what you want. But sometimes when something happens that causes you to focus in a very strong way, you're able to accomplish it, and sometimes not. Also, there's the other thing to acknowledge, is that none of you intended to stay in these physical bodies forever. And so there are all kinds of things that are wonderful and appropriate that help you to cycle through this life experience just in the way you intended. And that's sort of what you were asking about that. You're not going to be able to beat what you call death forever.
Feels like it, but yeah.
It means that your desire is stronger than your worrisome thoughts. But you hear what we're saying? Death is not a bad thing. We don't want to leave this conversation sounding like anyone who dies clearly had something out of whack, because that is not the case. That is not the case. There is this cycle and intentionality. When we talk about the receiving of thought, when you get into the receptive mode, so let's say, this is a wonderful conversation that's going to serve you all so well. Let's say that you've come into this physical body, and it does not matter what your age is, but let's say that from your non-physical standpoint and with cooperation and harmony from your physical standpoint, you've concluded that this life experience has given you what you came looking for. And so there is a decision from that non-physical perspective, a sort of blending of decisions from your physical and non-physical perspective, that the path of least resistance or the path of most allowing is to make your transition into non-physical. And so it doesn't matter by what path you choose to make that movement into non-physical. It is something that came from intentionality. Stay with us a little bit. We can feel that this is feeling a little muddy to you. So we're going to clear it up here. This subject is about the important distinction between a thought that you are thinking and a thought that you are receiving. Because when you really get in sync with who you are, then your powerful non-physical intentions become more dominant in the equation. And we can feel a little uneasiness within you even as you hear us say these words, because it sounds a little bit like, well, what if my inner being has decided that I'm done with this life before I am? What if my inner being has decided that I didn't intend to stay that long and I got done what I came to do, and so I'm going to be out of here? It doesn't happen like that, because the harmony between you and your inner being, in other words, you can feel when you have a zest for life. And the zest for life that you have is you recognizing the emotion that your inner being has about you. In fact, these positive emotions that you feel so often, when you feel enthusiasm or love or a very strong passion about something, that's you in the receptive mode, really in sync with your inner being, you see. And that's when you are at your most powerful. We want you to feel the leverage of control. We want you to feel the power of this life force, this energy that creates worlds as it flows through you. And so if you can think just a little less and allow just a little more, and realize that most of your thinking you're doing in your step one contrasting moments, and most of your receiving you're doing in that state of joy or appreciation or meditation. And you get your balance between those two steps a little more in alignment with what you really intended. Most of you, when you came into this physical experience, you knew that you would be thoughtful, and you knew that there would be plenty to focus upon, and you knew that you would think, and you knew that when you thought a thought, that thought too would think. You understood the power of vibration, and you understood what thought is, and you understood what energy is. But you intended to spend maybe 10 or 20, but mostly closer to 10% of your experience in that step one, where you're really exploring contrast and defining through your thought process what you prefer. Those are those moments when you say, I really do not want that, and that should not be happening, and I am feeling great irritation, or maybe I am irate about that. I'm feeling enormous injustice about that. And in that process, you're launching all of these rockets of desires about what would be better, about you physically or about humanity in general. And you intended the rest of your time to be spent in a satisfying mode of alignment with Source, where you are appreciating the unfolding of your experience, where you are witnessing the power of your focus. You intended to use your focus not so much to think thoughts of right and wrong and wanted and unwanted, but you intended to use your focus to align yourself with the satisfying thoughts that would give you satisfaction moment by moment, so that you could live happily ever after. Can you feel what we're getting at here? And most humans have that balance flipped, where 90% of the time you are irate and pushing against one thing and another, mostly because you are so integrated through media, and in these times through social media. So your balance is getting even more out of whack as you become more observers of life than you are deliberate creators of life, and knee-jerk responders of what you're observing rather than deliberate thinkers. Now, we want to be fair with you. When you are exploring contrast in this 10%, the way we like it to be, or 90%, the way you often allow it to be, of exploring contrast, let's be fair about it. When you're exploring that contrast, you are launching rockets of desire. You are knee-jerking. You are having knee-jerking responses to life. And part of that knee-jerk response to life is, I really don't want that. I really do want that. And that is of value. But the more time you spend in that comparison experience, the less time you're in satisfaction.